Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to CII's National Dialogue on Actions Towards Strengthening Food Systems in India, aligned with the UN Food Systems Summit 2021. India has committed to continue with its efforts in transforming into a sustainable agri-food system and to achieve the targets set in the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. We at CII are actively engaging in pre-summit activities, building commitment for carrying forward the outcomes of the summit and for affecting food system transformation in India. To begin with, the food system is being analyzed through 6 thematic lenses of production, processing, plate, planet, people, and policy. And multi-stakeholder mini-dialogues are being conducted towards developing the India Food Systems Vision 2030 report in partnership with Food Future Foundation, GIZ, NGOs, and other key stakeholders involved. The National Dialogue is a culmination of months of focused efforts towards identifying actionable pathways for helping India achieve the SDGs with regard to food systems. During the course of the next 2 days, this multi-stakeholder forum will deliberate on scaling actions towards feeding the most populous nation on this planet by 2030 in a sustainable manner. We will also be streaming all sessions of the National Dialogue on CII Hive. Our first session of the day focuses on boosting nature positive production. This session will focus on actions to optimize environmental resource use in food production, processing, and distribution, thereby reducing biodiversity loss, pollution, water use, soil degradation, and greenhouse gas emissions. Focus will also be on deepening understanding of the constraints and opportunities facing smallholder farmers and small-scale enterprises along the food value chain, and on reducing food losses and other negative environmental impacts. To set the context for this very important session, I now invite Mr. Duraiswamy Narayan for his opening remarks. Mr. Narayan is the Chair, CII Core Group on Sustainability, Senior Bayer Representative for South Asia, and Vice Chairman and Managing Director, Bayer Crop Science Limited. Mr. Narayan is also the global sponsor for Bayer's Smallholding Farming Initiative, which aims to provide holistic and innovative solutions for smallholder farmers in developing economies to enable them to grow their farms into sustainable businesses. May I now invite Mr. Narayan, please.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. It's a great pleasure to join. And good afternoon, good morning, good evening to all our panelists joining from all over the world. It's a pleasure to be with all of you, sirs. Before I start with my prepared remarks, let me introduce the esteemed speakers. Let me start by introducing Dr. Tirlochan Mahapatra, who is the Director General of ICAR and Secretary there. Dr. Mahapatra is a globally renowned scientist. Under his guidance, the scientific fraternity in the National Agriculture Research System has been working towards making Indian agriculture resilient. Prior to his current role, Dr. Mahapatra held top positions in Indian Agriculture Research Institute, New Delhi, and National Rice Research Institute, Cuttack. The second person I'd like to welcome is Atul Bagai, the country head UNEP. Mr. Bagai is the head of UNEP India office. UNEP is UN's leading global environmental body that sets the global environmental agenda. Mr. Bagai has decisively led from the front to fulfill its mandate across climate change, chemicals, waste and air quality, environmental governance, resource efficiency, environment under review, healthy and productive ecosystems, and resilience to disaster and conflicts. The next person we are honored to have with us is Mr. João Campari. He's a global leader for food practice at WWF and also the chair of the UNFSS Action Track 3. Dr. Campari holds a PhD in environmental economics and has over 25 years of experience in international development. He has held technical and executive positions in multilateral and bilateral agencies in the federal government of Brazil and has advised national and sub-national governments on the design and implementation of regional development policies that combine socio-economic rural development with conservation. Mr. Campari, let me say Brazil is one of my favorite countries in the world, having traveled there a number of times over the last 2.5 decades, and it's a pleasure to meet you, sir, virtually. And finally, let me introduce Dr. Ratan Lal. Dr. Lal is the Director, Carbon Management and Sequestration Center, Ohio State University. Over his career spanning more than 5 decades and 4 continents, Dr. Lal has promoted innovative soil-saving techniques benefiting livelihoods more than 500 million smallholder farmers today. Dr. Ratan Lal also received the 2020 World Food Prize for developing and mainstreaming a soil-centric approach to increasing food production that restores and conserves natural resources and mitigates climate changes. He's also the member of UNFSS scientific group. Dr. Lal, we know what a prestigious award it is, what you got, and we are truly honored to have your presence with us today. With that, let me start with my introductory comments. The world and humanity at large has over the centuries witnessed and overcome numerous challenges to survive and thrive, and this is true for India as well. At the same time, we are as a generation at a significant crossroad facing some of the most daunting challenges on how to save the planet and feed the world of today and for the future. By 2050, we will have more than 10 billion people in the planet while contending with the impact of climate change, water resources becoming scarce, degrading soil health, and a lower base land available for arable land for cultivation. It is evident clearly that a transition to a healthier, sustainable food system is not just an option, but it is the critical need of the hour to deliver. It is in this context that our discussion today on India's commitment to deliver on the UN Sustainable Development Targets by 2030 is timely. As the second most populous country in the world and soon to become the most populous, the commitment to deliver on zero hunger, zero poverty, while ensuring a sustainable and nature-positive production system is foundational for securing India of both today and the future. If you look back at the recent past, when COVID-19 hit us, it was a health crisis that was staring at us, not just in India, but the world over, which could have easily become a food crisis. As we see what played out in India in particular, the collaborative actions taken by the government bodies, farmers, industry, and various ecosystem players played a crucial role in mitigating the crisis without compromising the food security of the nation. There's a key learning from this, a strong collaboration and a will to deliver by all the stakeholders can make it happen. Actions included timely interventions of the government, policy level, fiscal stimulus, but at the same time, ensuring that essential food supply chains were not disrupted. Simultaneously, we've also seen some of the long-term policy changes starting to take shape, including the support for scaling up small farmer producer organizations, larger allocation of public resources for agri-infrastructure, all of which will provide a strong foundation in transforming the India's food and agricultural sector. At the same time, it's important to acknowledge the numerous challenges Indian agriculture faces, including the vagaries of nature due to climate change, fast depletion of water in a number of key states, degrading soil health, and more importantly, the continued challenges to secure farm incomes for millions of smallholder farmer families in the country. Having said that, we are a country with a thriving economy, have access to the best scientific talent in the world, have the capital and resources to invest, and also have the tools in the toolkit to deliver transformational change. We no longer have to wait for the inventions of the future to solve the challenges we face today. I strongly believe if we look at these challenges as significant opportunities of today and the future, we can position Indian agriculture as a strong pillar of agricultural and economic growth for the country to improve rural livelihood of the next decade and beyond, while at the same time delivering our strong commitment of zero hunger and zero poverty by creating a resilient and sustainable food agricultural system. So the question is, how can we deliver on this? Fundamental to this is all the stakeholders in the ecosystem need to embrace it as a common goal to deliver. This starts by acknowledging that securing farm incomes and delivering on environmental sustainability targets is not just a domain of any single stakeholder, but the broader society at large. Keeping sustainability at the core of things, calling for nature positive food production, the following actions could be the key drivers to drive this change. Number one, building out and leveraging a strong digital ecosystem. The digital ecosystem in India is leapfrogging across all sectors at a tremendous pace, especially at the time of COVID. We have seen this in front of us, and agriculture is no exception. This provides us with a huge opportunity, the opportunity to collaborate, to bring these technologies which are being developed by large companies like ours, a number of startups who are developing innovative digital solutions, and together test and learn and scale up as fast as we can. This needs for strong collaboration. One of the recent policy changes that the government has initiated on deregulating drones is one major step that will drive precision spraying and in turn optimize the use of resources and preserve soil health. The second big opportunity, I've spoken about it pretty frequently, and I truly believe this, how do we move the whole system to a collaborative crop ecosystem? It is the way forward with an end goal which will deliver improved incomes, but at the same time, sustainability metrics. With an end-to-end partner approach, this should help us take the next big leap in agriculture. At Bayer, we're already building out and testing some of these models in India under our global initiative called Better Life Farming. In India, we have strong partnership with Yara for crop nutrition, NetFM for drip irrigation, Axis Bank for financing access and digital banking. And also the system has a number of off-takers to buy the farmer produce like Dehat, AgroStar, AgriPrasad, to name a few. In addition, we have NGOs like Tata Trust who support us with, and all the partners with capacity building for farmers and dissemination of agronomy knowledge. Finally, we also have IFC who holds our feet to the fire by helping us measure the outcomes, including metrics whether farm incomes are improving, water conservation is being delivered, and are we seeing improvements in soil health. We're extremely encouraged with the results over the last 2 years, validating the proof of concept. And today we are more than 650 Better Life Farming centers operated by agri entrepreneurs, both men and women, supporting more than 500,000 farmers in underserved communities in Bihar, UP, Chhattisgarh, Orissa. The third dimension I would call out is how do we promote sustainable cultivation systems that reduces use of limited natural resources such as water. A good example we all know is the rice ecosystem and the amount of water it consumes. The question is, we know the answer. A good example is direct seeded rice. How do we therefore scale up direct seeded rice as an example to drive it and make it an economically viable model and drive adoption? Will this also result in releasing land for crop diversification? These are important questions to answer and drive towards change. And finally, the transformational opportunity of government policies, including reforms for accelerated new innovations. And this again, I'd like to bring back to my earlier point, leveraging digital, leveraging crop systems, leveraging the FPOs that we talked about. But the most critical dimension of all this is how can we accelerate innovation access for smallholder farmers in seeds, crop protection, fertilizer, biotechnology, gene editing, which is today available for a number of farmers in other countries in the world. So therefore, how can we reform the regulatory system to drive adoption and scale? Mr. Campari is here, and I have the example of looking at Brazil. Clearly, Brazil today is at the forefront of regulatory approvals and processes and using it as a competitive advantage in a number of cases ahead of even countries like United States. So there's a lot of learning for us from a country like Brazil. And finally, as Team Bayer, we are signed up for this challenge. We are a global company with a heritage of more than 165 years, of which we are celebrating 125 years of our presence in India this year. We are proud of our global vision, health for all, hunger for none. This is already backed by a global commitment to collaboratively improve livelihoods of 100 million smallholders across the world by 2030, of which India is a big component, having the largest population of smallholders in the world. Finally, let me conclude by saying we are at the cusp of an opportunity to drive the next agricultural revolution led by sustainability and livelihood dimensions. The core of it at the same time is to strive to deliver more food to feed the growing population with a strong focus on delivering nutritional security. Before I conclude, can I request for the visual to come up, please? Because that to me illustrates what is in front of us. What we are seeing is, this is a farmer in my mind taking the next big leap. And it is the onus is on us to work together with him or her as a farmer to bring and make the big leap a success to preserve and drive the sustainability of the future and the planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Naran, for your address. May I now call upon Dr. Ratan Lal, Professor of Soil Science, Director of the Carbon Management and Sequestration Center, Ohio State University. Dr. Lal, please.
I suppose you can see the slides.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. You should be able to see the full screen. I would like to thank Mr. Narayan. I want to thank Dr. Mahapatra, Dr. Campari, Mr. Bagai, many other participants. Thank you for the opportunity to be a speaker this morning, especially sharing the podium with Dr. Campari. Indian agriculture is a global success story, and I want to congratulate Dr. Mahapatra and ICR and the scientists of India. Food grain production between 1947 and 2020 increased by a factor of 6. Horticulture production went up by a factor of 10. Milk by a factor of 9. Fish by a factor of 13. That makes us all very proud of what India had done. The grain exports stand at 20 million ton, grain buffer stock at 50 million ton, poverty reduction considerably from 70% to 20%. My salute to the farmers of India, ICR and its institution, and the scientists who made this happen. A miracle, indeed. A miracle similar to Sarado miracle that Dr. Campari knows very well. However, there are some problems. We have degraded soils, polluted waters, impure air, and lost biodiversity. These problems can be addressed, should be addressed. These are challenges facing soil scientists and policymakers. There are some other concerns about green revolution. It was primarily cereal-centric, rice and wheat. It was based on inputs, fertilizer, pesticides, irrigation, energy, monoculture. It was driven by subsidies and procurement, and it has created some environmental issue, including soil degradation, water exploitation, pollution of water and air. We have some concerns on sustainable development goals, which the primary goals on which the soil science plays a major role: ending hunger, number 2, number 13, climate action, number 15, life on land, land degradation, neutrality. Unfortunately, and I want to say it very loudly, the world soil did not appear in any of the 17 sustainable development goal main lines that were given. I do not know why, and I hope to avoid this mistake, omission at the World Food System Summit. These are the issues. The sustainable development goals are not on track, either the primary or secondary. The secondary end poverty, the good health, clean water, renewable energy, because soil was sidetracked. And I hope this will not happen. The Action Track 3 and the leadership of Joe Campari have been talking about nature positive agricultural protective practices, such as protecting, managing, and restoring soil, strengthening biodiversity, improving water quality and renewability, adapting negative emission farming, not emission neutral farming, negative emission farming. That's a very important difference. Reducing input of chemicals, using biostimulants and organic amendments, promoting biocircular economy, and supporting the One Health concept. And the One Health concept is the health of soil, plants, animal, people, environment, and planet is one and indivisible. And using, of course, digital innovations such as the precision agriculture. That brings me to the question of regenerative agriculture. What is it? There is no one practice. It's a combination of many site-specific practices. We have 300,000 known soil series in the world. To assume that one practice is universally applicable is being naive. Therefore, there are basic principles of regenerative agriculture. It is inspired by eco-innovation. It's powered by non-carbon energy. It's driven by a circular economy and green infrastructure. And it's supported by the recarbonization of the terrestrial biosphere, soil and vegetation at the bedrock of sustainable development. Our soils have lost the carbon stock, both in soil and vegetation. Therefore, recarbonization of soil and the terrestrial biosphere is the main thing. I mentioned negative emission agriculture. What is it? Reducing carbon emissions from farm operation, sequestering carbon in soil and vegetation, especially soil and trees, wetlands, mine lands, degraded lands, and many other ecosystems. And India has a tremendous potential to do that. What are some of the examples of the nature positive agriculture? Conservation agriculture, regenerative agriculture, agroecology, agroforestry, integration of crops with trees and livestock, practices with a positive soil ecosystem carbon budget, positive. Therefore, the slogan is CNPK, C before NPK, through integrated soil fertility management, balanced use of plant nutrients, not just nitrogen because it's subsidized, but also phosphorus, potassium, micronutrients, 17 micronutrients, and drip fertigation rather than flood irrigation. These are some of the examples. Therefore, the 21st Green Revolution must be soil-based, soil resilience-based, ecosystem-based, eco-efficiency, knowledge-based, driven by science and management-related issue that we know how to do that. One thing I must remind Indian colleagues and scientists, and especially industry, the law of return. The law of return says that the substances we take from soil and nature must be returned to the place from which it was taken. That was Sir Albert Howard. And he was in 1920, the president of the Indian Science Academy. This was his presidential address. He was also the one who said the health of soil, plants, animal, and people is one and indivisible. We have gone a step further, say health of ecosystem and the planetary processes also. This law of return is very critical. Take the crop residue away, not put the compost and manure, mine the nutrients and not put them back is a problem which we must address. Another part I'd like to mention from the Indian point of view is the urbanization. The cities in India, New Delhi, has grown between 1950 and 2025 by a factor of 20. Calcutta 5, Bombay 9, Pune 11, Hyderabad 8, Bangalore 14, Madras, Chennai 6. And therefore, we must think about how to feed the urban population by growing food within the urban city, by recycling water and nutrients which are brought into the cities. Therefore, urban agriculture is really soil-less farming, soil-less. Soil is such a precious resource, we must protect it and save it and restore it for many other uses. So urban farming, especially in view of the shrinking arable land, warming climate, increasing water scarcity and growing urban and total population, it necessitates soil scientists and agronomists to look beyond the traditional farming, which are soil-based operation, to highly efficient greenhouse or vertical farming involving aquaculture, aquaponics, hydroponics, aeroponics, aerofarms, and many other soil-less cultures in sky farming or vertical farming. And this approach would be useful in water scarce countries, water scarce region, and increasing resilience against disruptions such as COVID. COVID has really disrupted Indian economy, which has shrank by 7.3%. So soil-specific urban farming, which does not necessarily involve soil, is really a solution which we must focus. The question is, how would India feed itself by 2050? The fact is we already produce enough. As I mentioned, the Green Revolution was a miracle. And I must give credit to ICAR and other institutions, but the food waste is also very high, 30 to 50%. Therefore, creating value addition from grains could be very important, especially in relation to industry. Increasing access to food, addressing poverty, inequality, civil strife, political stability, improving distribution, increasing uses of pulses and plant-based sources of protein, alternate sources of protein, accepting personal responsibility, not taking things for granted, especially soil, food, and natural resources, and increasing productivity from existing land, restoring degraded land, increasing biological nitrogen fixation, protecting prime land against urbanization and brick making, and returning some marginal land back to nature. That's really the concept where the farming carbon can be a very important commodity. Farming carbon means growing soil carbon as a farm commodity that can be traded, bought and sold, and create another income stream for farmers. How much is the income stream? Somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 rupees per acre per year if farmers can return the crop residue, not burn it, grow forages, and adopt controlled grazing and soil and water conservation. That's a minimum. Hopefully, it can be much more than that. Therefore, food sustainability and environmental, it must be also institutional, must be economic, it must be social, cultural, moral, and ethical. Spiritual, of course, the aesthetic aspect, Dharti Mata, is a very important part of the stewardship. And this is what it means in terms of sustainable food production system. We must also understand that food is medicine. That means nutrition sensitive agriculture. Food must be nutritionally rich. And famines, I must make that statement, are man-made tragedies. We must make famine and mass starvation politically intolerable, morally toxic, ethically unthinkable, and humanly unacceptable through restoration of soil health. And lastly, the mantra that I'd like to leave with you is healthy soil equal to healthy diet, equal to healthy people, equal to healthy ecosystem, equal to healthy planetary processes. And Mahatma Gandhi said, to forget how to dig the earth and to tend the soil is to forget ourselves. Please do not forget ourselves. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you.
Thank you, Dr. Lal, for your very insightful address. It has indeed been a privilege to have you with us today. And I'm sure we all will take back your mantra as we move ahead towards our Vision 2030. May I now call upon Mr. Joao Campari, Global Leader Food Practice, WWF International, for his address. Mr. Campari, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here, and a big warm welcome to our friends from India. Thank you for taking the time to join this dialogue, and thank you for the organizers for inviting me to speak to you today. Dialogue like today's are invaluable in uncovering the needs, innovations, and ideas that will help us deliver the 2030 sustainability agenda. Over the past 18 months, there have been over 800 of these independent food system summit dialogues, along with 145 national dialogues. These have generated thousands of ideas on how to transform food systems. So the ideas that have been generated have been fed into the action tracks, of which there are 5 in total at the UN Food System Summit, covering nutrition, consumption, livelihoods, resilience, as well as nature positive production, which is the topic here today. So action tracks have clustered ideas and formed working groups to chart a path forward for action and implementation. For instance, in Action Track 3, where we work to boost nature positive production at scale, there are coalitions that brought together member states, the private sector, civil society, around issues like regenerative agriculture, agroecology, agrobiodiversity, blue and aquatic foods, sustainable livestock and soil health. The ideas that you generate here today in this dialogue will feed into these coalitions and solution clusters, and they will be the blocks on which we will build upon in the post-summit. The overarching goal of Action Track 3 is to globally meet the fundamental human right to healthy and nutritious food while operating within planetary boundaries. And we activate this goal by pursuing 3 integrated pathways. First, we work to protect nature from further deforestation and conversion to food and feed production. Second, we must sustainably manage our food producing lands and waters to meet nature and people's needs. And thirdly, we work hard to restore degraded land, degraded ecosystems and rehabilitate soil health for sustainable food production, or like Ratan reminded us, simply to give back to nature what once belonged to nature, since we have just converted too much land. Today, we are far from meeting these goals and reaching these outcomes. We are now likely to reach 1.5 degrees of global warming within the next 2 decades, with food systems producing approximately 29% of all greenhouse gas emissions. Food producing systems use most of our land and is the largest driver of deforestation and biodiversity loss. It also withdraws 70% of the available freshwater. In 2020, 811 million people went hungry. This is over 100 million more than the previous year. The simplistic solution to feeding the hungry is generally thought of to increase yields as quickly as possible. In most countries, the success of production is measured by the size of the yield, but we must be careful about this, given that we are seriously transgressing some planetary boundaries. Yields cannot be maximized at any cost. We need to reduce the use of chemical pesticides and fertilizer. We must also stop tilling the soil beyond its regenerative capacity. While this might increase yields in the short term, it is likely to degrade soils over time, making it less productive, which will further drive the conversion of nature for expansion of agriculture, which reduces the carbon sequestration capabilities of natural systems. We see this happening today in tropical forest places, as well as on grasslands and savannas. So it's a widespread problem. Already 52% of all farmland across the world is degraded or underutilized. We cannot afford to increase this figure. Indeed, we must work very, very hard to rehabilitate soils and ensure the vast majority of our farmland is healthy and productive, and that agriculture becomes a carbon sink. This would be immensely helpful for humanity to deal with climate change. Adopting nature-positive production at scale is an urgent and high priority if we are to meet nature, climate, and social development goals. The only way to successfully measure food production is when we consider all its benefits and all its costs together. We call this the true value of food. And many scientists are working on this topic right now, and there is a coalition dedicated to that within the UN Food System Summit. Globally, food consumed has a market value of $9 trillion US, but external costs are estimated to be almost double, about $20 trillion. These externalities accrue from $7 trillion US in environmental costs, $11 trillion US in costs to human life, and $1 trillion US in economic costs. This means that food today is priced at roughly a third of its true value. We need to apply full understanding of the impacts of food systems and to price food accordingly. A matrix for measuring true costs already exists. I'll give you an example. The TEEB Agri-Evaluation Framework, for example, looks at how natural, produced, human and social capitals deliver environmental, economic, health, and social impacts. And it has already been used in the smallholder program, or to assess the smallholder program in Andhra Pradesh, India, to successfully measure yields and income when nature-based solutions are adopted at scale for people and for nature. We also need to change incentives to enable small and large farmers to adopt practices that deliver nature-positive food production at the scale the planet needs. In Action Track 3, a coalition has been formed on repurposing public support to food and agriculture, looking at how subsidies and financial incentives can be adapted to ensure that producers who are implementing nature-positive production practices are properly rewarded. Just 1% of the $700 billion of subsidies which farmers and fishers receive today each year is used to benefit the environment. The rest goes towards intensive industrial production systems which support conversion of nature, overuse of chemicals, and monocultures or farms with limited agrobiodiversity. Agri-food support systems must be repurposed to financially reward farmers and fishers for maintaining and optimizing the services that their lands and waters can render to people and planet, without compromising, obviously, the human right to safe, healthy, and nutritious food. Farmers and fishers and other food producers need to be incentivized more and also rewarded for providing food that is healthy for people and planet. This is especially the case for small farmers, artisanal fishers, who are the true stewards of land and water resources. And in that role, they are the guardians of nature and climate. Indeed, smallholders and artisan fishers are generally the food producers who are using nature-positive production practices. Most don't rely on artificial inputs, nor are heavily mechanized. They use traditional methods and tend to their lands and waters, grow and harvest a variety of foods which ensure soils and waters remain healthy. We must support these food producers and create an enabling environment to scale nature-positive solutions. That said, nature-positive food production is not limited to small-scale production. There is already evidence that it can be applied at scale, supporting nature and benefiting livelihoods of farmers. I mentioned the program in Andhra Pradesh earlier. Over 520,000 farmers have adopted zero-budget natural farming to increase yields of maize by 8% and chilies by 32%. Incomes have risen between 20,000 and 45,000 rupees per acre. Meanwhile, agroecological practices were introduced in the Satpura Pench Tiger Corridor in central Indian landscapes to prevent agriculture, soil erosion, and farms being replaced with mining, industry, and urbanization. The small and medium-sized farms are vitally important in providing ecological connectivity, which allows tigers and other mammals to move around while producing food. More than 6,000 cotton farmers have been able to maintain and improve their farms, protecting this tiger corridor, but also reduce their input costs by 75% and demand 10% increase in their prices for their organic cotton. So a win-win solution for nature and for people. Further afield, if I can use an example from another part of the world, in Paraguay, large parts of the Atlantic forest have been deforested, soy plantations and livestock production expand. But farmer collectives have been able to revitalize areas by adopting nature-positive practices. They have planted hundreds of thousands of native trees to improve water flows and soil health and provide alternative nutritious crops. The leaves of the indigenous yerba mate tree are now recognized as a superfood, and the farmers have gained access to international markets, dramatically increasing their incomes and food security. So these are just some examples of agroecological and regenerative agricultural practices in the making, but they can impact and scale. They can be scaled further if we integrate technology and social and financial innovations. The solutions we need to achieve a nature-positive, food-secure, net zero emissions world already exist. We need to be bold and ambitious to finance and implementing them at scale. The Food System Summit can be a catalyst for such bold thinking And we hope the coalitions developed through the summit process will increase collaboration between multiple stakeholders and accelerate food systems transformation. We are only 9 years away from meeting or missing the Sustainable Development Goals. This means, if you're a farmer or a fisher, that there are just 9 harvests left in which to take action. We must seize the moment. There is untold potential for India to grow nature-positive food production, for healthy people and a healthy planet. And I strongly believe that the determination and courage that you are famed for, you can play a leadership role. You're already doing it. I look forward to the outcomes of today's meeting and to your thinking being fed into the summit across action tracks and the coalitions we are putting together. We need food systems that work for people and planet and that deliver shared prosperity to all. Thank you again for inviting me to speak to you and for participating in this dialogue. And I wish us all a very productive session ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Campari, for your very insightful address. May I now call upon Mr. Atul Bagai, Head of Country Office, United Nations Environment Programme, for his address on building resilience and boosting resource efficiency. Mr. Bagai, please.
Thank you. And I would like to welcome all my previous speakers and thank CII for giving UNEP this opportunity to talk about certain very critical issues. And I'm very thankful to all the previous speakers for laying down the whole scenario so beautifully, not only at India level, but also at a global level. And India certainly could learn a lot from the other countries, what they're doing. And India can also give a lot of feedback and a lot of experience in this field. Countries. And I'm very happy that Lochan ji is also here, who's been leading the work on agriculture in India and has some amazing kind of innovations that have come into this field in the past few years. Of course, a lot of such kind of webinars and events are being organized also because of the food summit that has been called for in the next month. There's a lot of action that's happening at all levels in all the countries. But it all assumes a lot of importance for India. And at a global level, of course, the broad core question is whether today's agriculture and food systems could meet the needs of a global population, which is being projected at 9 billion by the mid-century, or possibly peak at 11 billion by the end of the century. So whether we are geared up for meeting not only the food needs, but also the nutrition levels, and also addressing what Ratan Lal ji talked so beautifully about, how looked at. If we look at the same core question from an India perspective, certainly this question also needs to be seen that can we meet these demands for food in India with similar kind of population projections? But I think our added issue is how to ensure the use of natural resource base in a sustainable manner. And I'm very happy that the previous speakers have certainly alluded to this very, very critical part of the puzzle and of the question, which the farmers, which the agriculturalists, which the policymakers are all facing right now. There's no doubt that agriculture has become certainly more efficient with increased competition for natural resources, with competing land use claims, of course, driven by the growing population. But I think now food systems increasingly importantly need to be looked at through a systems approach, and also from a fact, as I've been asked to speak on from the resilience part and from the resource efficiency part. I heard with a lot of interest in terms of some of the previous speakers talking about water usage and the impact of agriculture on climate change and issues like this. And I think we all need to look at this in a very holistic manner. As the Secretary General recently talking to the students in the Columbia University was mentioning that we are facing a triple planetary crisis. And this triple planetary crisis is the crisis of climate change, the crisis of biodiversity, and the crisis of pollution. All three crises certainly are interlinked, but a very big underlying and underpinning current to these triple planetary crises is the way we are going to approach food systems and agriculture in the next 2 or 3 decades. And that's going to be a very, very important area of work for the governments. In fact, the Secretary General said that we are right now waging a war against nature, and we need to make peace with nature. And making peace with nature certainly would mean of how our food systems are geared up to not only enhance biodiversity and ecosystems, but also in the same time feed the increasing population that we were talking about. There have been a lot of studies done. All the previous speakers have talked about the quantum of problem, of the kind of impact it has on climate change, about the gigatons of CO2 equivalent emissions from the agricultural feed that come in. UNEP recently came up with a food waste index report, which also talked about a very big problem of food waste and food loss. But I was thinking I'll spend just about 5-6 minutes, instead of emphasizing the quantum of the problem, on seeing what can be done about this, or what is happening in other parts of the world and in India. And I think the broad underlying current we need to look at is that ecosystem-based adaptation measures need to be integrated into national and state level planning for food security needs. And I think they need to form part of the national adaptation plan. This policy perspective, this policy narrative is the key to moving forward on what we are calling of sustainable agriculture, or resilient, climate resilient agriculture, or I heard with a lot of interest some of the speakers talking of chemical-free or pesticide-free agriculture and issues like this. And I would certainly like to highlight that the Government of India, through its National Mission on Sustainable Agriculture, and Trilochan ji is here, I'm sure he's going to talk about it. There is a whole new emphasis right now in the Ministry of Agriculture and ICAR on promoting traditional methods of agriculture in India. And as you're all aware, India was one of the few countries that was focusing on integrated pest management as a traditional method, rather than looking at the newer methods of pesticides and fertilizers. So I think bringing back those traditional methods is something that is the key for making the food systems in India sustainable, resilient, and meeting the humongous need of the increasing population in the next 2 to 3 decades. I think there are certain very good global and national initiatives, and I can highlight a few of them. For example, to address the food loss during transportation, FAO has introduced improved sustainable bulk packaging, which is a model that can be a very useful thing. UNEP, together with a high-level coalition, Champion 12.3, has developed a target, measure, act approach to food loss and waste reduction. And I was very intrigued to listen to Ratan Lal ji and his emphasis on soil. And I think that is really a very critical aspect of looking at agriculture, and looking at ecosystem restoration, and looking at resilience from a food system perspective. And I would like to highlight here, and especially in response to what Ratan Lal ji said, we are working very closely with ICAR, and I'm very thankful to ICAR for that. for a very innovative and new approach, which is the ecosystem, the economics of ecosystem and biodiversity, an approach that UNEP is propagating in a few countries, has been launched recently in India. And we are working in Uttarakhand and Uttar Pradesh in the Gangetic Plain on looking at the costs of ecosystem losses, the costs of biodiversity losses as a result of agriculture, or the advantages or ecosystem services that can be brought in through restoration of soils, through restoration of ecosystems, through restoration of agricultural systems in these two states. And I think some of these examples are good examples of how they should be scaled up at all India level. Another very big, of course, experiment that's happening in India is what's happening in Andhra Pradesh. And though we are certainly working very closely with the Andhra government, but I think Andhra government's efforts on the community farming, on the low budget or zero budget natural farming is a model to study, get more scientific evidence out of it, and certainly scale it up at India level and at global level. And I think there are very important lessons coming out of it. A very integral part of the food systems and a good solution that I would like to highlight, and this is what UNEP through the Cool Coalition is working on, is on an efficient and integrated cold chain with holistic models and whole systems approach, like the community cool hubs. And I'm very happy that the Government of India, the Ministry of Agriculture, is working very closely with University of Birmingham, with CII, GIZ to set up a center of excellence in Haryana state, and cold chain logistics resource center, which the Ministry of Commerce is setting it up. And I think these 2 or 3 examples are very good examples of how food systems should be looking at not only the production part, but also the transportation and taking it to the population that needs the food in a manner that it's fresh, it's efficient, and it's also nutritious. And we are working very closely with FAO also on some of these issues. And finally, before concluding, I'd like to highlight a very new emerging problem, which is the urban food systems and the important entry points for food systems transformation. And UNEP in India is starting to work on what is a sustainable, healthy, and inclusive food systems transformation, which is a global initiative in partnership with FAO that aims to implement actions to move towards sustainable food systems in urban and peri-urban areas. And I think that's a very important area of work that needs to be looked at if we are going to meet the food needs of the 9 billion or the 11 billion people we are talking of in or 30 years. I'd like to basically conclude here by thanking CII for bringing together so many partners together, and also by highlighting this issue and bringing it to the attention of the policymakers in India. And I was in fact very happy that the UNEP food waste study that raised the profile of this issue quite substantially, to the extent that a few questions were asked in the parliament. And that's a very good signal of policymakers taking notice of challenges in a particular field. And I think food system is an area which needs all the attention of all the policymakers, the agriculturalists, and all stakeholders together to look at this. And this upcoming food summit is certainly not a platform for negotiation, but to a time-bound opportunity to unleash ambitious new actions and innovative solutions. And UNEP would be very happy to support all the stakeholders in India to that regard. Thanks a lot for giving us this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bagai. UNEP's pilots under the Cool Coalition project are indeed commendable. I am now honored to invite Dr. Trilochan Mohapatra, Secretary, Department of Agricultural Research and Education and Director General ICAR for his keynote address. ICAR is one of the most exemplary institutions and is responsible for India today being a food secure and food surplus nation. Under his leadership, there has been significant impetus to the next generation of innovation with renewed focus on sustainability and significant private sector partnership towards taking these solutions to scale. May I now invite Dr. Trilochan Mohapatra, please.
Thank you very much. Thanks, CII, for inviting me for this very important deliberation on food systems and very specifically the nature positive food production. Certainly in the context of climate change, in the context of degradation of natural resources, the emphasis on sustainable food production systems or food systems requires everybody's attention, whether policymakers or individuals, non-government, government organizations, scientists, farmers, all need to really ponder and also substantially contribute in the form of partnership. And in that context, role of the private sector also emerges as one of the very, very important aspect of sustainable food systems. We all know that UN Food Systems Summit is happening. There are a lot of deliberations happening globally, and so also at the national level. Thanks to CII for organizing this national dialogue on agriculture and food, and defining actions towards strengthening food systems in India. Thanks to my previous speakers, all have very nicely, excellent way placed before you the situation and also the pathway, what way we should be moving towards nature positive agriculture, a nature positive production system. India's story, if you see 1950s till date, it is described as a very elegant success story. Time is limiting, I would not really go into the details, but few data points I'll place before you to highlight what I'm trying to say. From about 50 million tons of food grain production in 50-51 to 308 million tons of food grains in last year. So more than 6 times production in food grains. And that is something which has made India to export substantially instead of being a net importer. And in this context, let me mention that the technologies which contributed to green revolution, they continued their contribution. And even today, they contribute to the development that we see with regard to enhanced production. The irrigation, which was about 22 million hectares in 50-51, has gone up to about 98 million hectares in recent times. The nutrient consumption also has increased, and from less than 1 million tons in 1950-51, particularly fertilizer nutrient, to close to 30 million tons in the year 2019 and 2020. So a massive increase in fertilizer nutrient consumption, and also the irrigated area that has happened. The productivity as a consequence also very significantly jumped from 522 kg per hectare with regard to food grains to more than 2,300 kg per hectare in 1920. So this scenario says that agriculture has moved very significantly. At times, the pace has been slow, but in certain crops and commodities, it has been quite significant. It's not just food grain production, even fish production has grown past 5-6 years. If we take the annual growth rate, more than 6%. Milk production close to that. And these are the figures. This goes beyond the food grain production scenario and developments. So in totality, the production scenario in agriculture and allied sector has been quite satisfactory. And the rates of growth that we see are much higher than anywhere else in the world. So that provides food to this, sufficient food to this 1.3 billion plus population, and we are exporting. But while I'm emphasizing on this development that we have been able to increase production, and that has been possible through provisioning of the irrigation, the kind of nutrient supply, and other associated requirements being met. But if we compare, say if we take fertilizer consumption, it's about 133 kg per hectare, and pesticides about 0.6 kg per hectare. And one can draw a comparison with other countries where the productivity is quite high, much higher than what we see in India. But then, what extent it is actually degrading or retarding the growth, or at the same time impacting the nature. So this requires quite a bit of further analysis, but our overall analysis shows that there is quite a bit of diversity in the country from region to region, and the kind of treatments that we provide to natural resources while managing crops and other commodities. There is quite a bit of variation, and that's the reason why there are concerns. Unbalanced use of fertilizers, and in certain situations, unsustainable fishing practices, or for that matter, some of the practices which are not conducive for growing healthy animal populations. So all three aspects we are trying to analyze and also deal with, to manage sustainably food production system, to manage the animal system, which is a huge in this country. I will not go into those details. So that's a healthy population, better managed population, and also we have a responsible and sustainable fishery happening in this country. So in that context, mention was made, and I believe that I don't have to really go into those details. We have to meet the challenges in this country, of higher food grain requirements or food requirements as we go along because of the growing population. but at the same time, without compromising the natural resource base. So sustainably enhancing production to meet the food demands. Mention was made that we are working on sustainable production, and we have a national mission on sustainable agriculture, and it covers all the states and union territories, and that's what the focus is. The Department of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare is carrying out this elaborately, and I will not go into those. And there are several components of this national mission on sustainable agriculture. We are also being part of this promoting few aspects. I'll very briefly touch upon those, so that there is nature positive production happening in the country, and we have sustainability, long-term sustainability, ensured in the process. But at the same time, the livelihoods are ensured, and Honorable Prime Minister's call of enhancing farmers' income, doubling, tripling, or quadrupling, and whatever, and doubling by 2022 to start with. So that's another aspect of this production system. And how do we actually plan to do this, and how we are implementing? Very briefly, I'll touch upon. Time is already gone, actually, and we are 5 minutes beyond 5 o'clock. So I'll spend another maybe 6 minutes to highlight some of the very, very important points. How do we really deal with this situation? We know this country has a vast farming community, and very importantly, 85% of them are small and marginal. 93 million small farms, 93 million small farms, and 92 million farm households, in fact, having less than 1 hectare of their land, and that less than 1 hectare is fragmented, located in a few places. So that is a big challenge for us. And even in fact, 70% of the farmers having less than even 0.5 hectare area. So this is one aspect of it that we have to really deal with. So when we see this, and the use of chemical fertilizers and pesticides being grossly skewed in respect of few districts and few areas. For instance, 290 districts of this country consume 85% of the fertilizer urea, and rest 450 odd districts consume only 15% of the urea. So it's largely organic kind of production system happening. And so also the pesticides, where the countries are using more than 10 kg, we are using less than even 1 kg of pesticides per hectare, but certain areas are using large scale. So keeping all that in mind, that small and marginal natures of farming, and that we have to keep with the population growth and produce more, and that we have to have sustainability in the production system. We have to address climate change issues, and the water, which is becoming more and more limiting, more and more salinization of land happening, the inland salinity increasing, the inundation of the seawater happening in the coastal areas, and the temperature rising, carbon dioxide, other greenhouse gas emissions happening. So all these keeping all these in mind. So what we are defining, there are a few things, 3-4 points, very briefly I'll touch upon. One is the integrated farming system models, most appropriate for the small and marginal land holdings. And we have been doing research for quite some time now, and built about 60 such models after several years of trials. And it integrates not only crops, but animals and fishery systems appropriately, and also agroforestry systems, a number of different crops depending on the suitability to a particular situation, and that enhances the ambit of addressing the issues related to climate change and also farmers' income adequately. So the production system becomes sustainable, the income also is ensured, the livelihoods are secured, and then these models are implemented. Thousands, more than 15,000 such models are all implemented by the governments, the Tamil Nadu government and Kerala governments, for instance, they are put in place in farmers' field. And 30 of these models are bankable models. And NABARD has come forward and we are deliberating that how do we really fund these schemes for the farmers for initial land shaping and all that, so that the farmers' income is ensured. And very importantly, nature positive agriculture happening there. And there lies the importance. Why? Here, the cropping intensity increases to 300%. That's very important, without compromising the land quality, water availability, and so on and so forth. And the input cost is reduced to the tune of 72%. And because of recycling and reuse of the kind of waste that comes out of the system. And the kind of on-farm generation of nutrients to the tune of 134 kg nitrogen, 50 kg phosphorus, 106 kg potash, and that happens per hectare on an average is happening because of these integrated farming system models. Soil organic carbon, Dr. Ratan Lal was emphasizing on the soil. Soil organic carbon improving by 22% in 5 years. And that is a big gain out of these integrated farming system models that we have put in place. And it is actually increasing the share of renewable energy system and energy efficiency increasing very, very significantly. And there are several other aspects, water productivity increasing and in the range of 5.9 to 12.6 kg per meter cube. And also diversification increasing very significantly, and sustainability index ranging from 0.5 to 0.9, very, very significant. And also farm diversity index, we are talking of biodiversity increasing to the level of 0.8. And we are calculating the ecosystem gains that we are getting out of these integrated farming system models. And I believe integration of, substantial support of the private, not just NABARD system of funding, the private CSR coming in large scale and supporting this activity would help implementation of, integrated farming system models large scale. And that would contribute to nature positive production system without compromising productivity, without compromising the natural resource base of the country. And that's very, very important. One point I would like to mention and emphasize. And in that context, I should also mention that the government programs are there, and they are also supporting the Paramparagat Krishi Vikas Yojana is happening by the Department of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, and it's a large network of kind of organizations, institutions, including ICR organizations that's happening. The second one, which is a big step in the direction of nature positive, agriculture, is promotion of organic farming, and that's again another area, and it is growing during past 6 years. It's growing at the rate of 22% area growth. And that's something which is very, very significant. That reveals how the government is putting emphasis on this particular aspect, which is actually nature positive. And I should also tell very emphatically that we are putting this technology after 6-7 years of research so that we do not compromise on the productivity. And that's the underlying fact which should be taken into account. And even the natural farming systems, wherever what was talked about, that also we are assessing, and we are not rushing up. And unless we are convinced that how much it can contribute in terms of sustainability, in terms of nature positivity, and in terms of productivity, we are reassuring ourselves, and that's what we are doing. And let me mention very briefly one more point, that with regard to organic farming, again, we have about 51 such models which we have built in a cropping system model, and integrated organic system practices, including the animal system integrated there. And I believe that's another area that could go a long way in solving the problem. But then there are issues of certification and so on and so forth, and export, linking organic to the export. That's a big export market there. And very importantly, the lessons learned, the continuous practice of raising crops organically, that sequesters carbon. And that's the important point. Sequesters carbon up to 63% higher than the carbon stock which we have in 10 years. That's the kind of comparison which one can make. And soil organic carbon increasing 22%, and also water holding capacity increasing by 15 to 20%. So these are all nature positive cultural production systems which are scientific evidence based and validated in large areas. In fact, in multiple locations, in different cropping systems and farming system approach, and in a system perspective which have been studied. And I believe these are the kind of pathways that in which the government of India is moving. And in fact, there are different programs with, as I said, the centrally sponsored specific schemes, All India Network Program on Organic Farming, Paramparagat Krishi Vikas Yojana, as I said, Mission Organic Value Chain Development for Northeastern region, Modern Organic Agriculture Development Initiatives for Ladakh, for instance. So there are various government programs which are initiated, and they are actually strengthening for this nature positive production systems in this country, and without compromising our needs in years to come, given the diversified food needs, given the nutritious food requirements of this country to manage and mitigate the malnutrition, and also very importantly, the addressing the climate change issues. So all these are being emphasized. I'll cite one example that how we are addressing this. That the rice wheat system is a very important system in this country. Sustainable agricultural production system that we are focusing on. Here, the rice stubble is burned, and we are focusing on using mechanization to provide sustainable agricultural platform. The happy seeder that we invented, and that has gone large scale to the farmers' field. And that has reduced burning by 52%. But that's not the final solution. We have many other ways to address 23 million tons of rice straw that is produced out of Punjab and Haryana and Western Uttar Pradesh. So that's a huge quantity. There are alternative ways which are being now explored by the government. But in this program, let me tell you that the conservation agriculture practices are leading to improvement of soil properties, the soil carbon improving, water retention, moisture retention in soils improving, yield increasing, and very importantly, chemical fertilizer use is reducing. 20 kg urea per hectare is used less in case of conservation agriculture practices when zero till is used, and the residue is actually getting incorporated in the soil. And 6 lakh hectare of direct seeded rice in case of Punjab this year, using conservation agriculture practices, zero till methods, and happy seeder. And all these are very, very important aspects of nature positive agriculture that we are promoting at this point in time. And I strongly believe that all these are not really enough. As I said, this country is quite diverse. The eastern part, the southern part, the northeastern part, quite diverse, and central part is quite diverse and complex situations. And we have to promote the climate resilient varieties for nature positive agriculture. We have to have more of nutrient use efficiency in our crops for nature positive agriculture. And we have to have, because we have to promote technology, the precision agriculture tools and technologies for nature positive agriculture. The amount of water required, whenever it is required, the amount it is required, that much would be applied, and that would be reducing the water footprint in the environment. And so also the nutrition requirement, as it is measured based on sensors, would be provided through fertigation mechanism, so that there is a nature positive agricultural systems happening in this country. So we are moving in this direction. It requires investment. It requires engagement of private and public together. the non-government organizations to have large-scale demonstrations, talking to the farmers, changing their attitudes. That is the toughest task before us. It's a quite diverse country. Changing the attitude has been very, very tough. And I'm sure, with engagement of all, we should be able to address this. There's a big challenge in this country. And, I'm sure, with the kind of expertise that we have, the kind of, organizational, institutional mechanisms that we have, kind of positive mindset and the push that the government has, and kind of international organizations that they are there to, do hand-holding, and the private partnership. All these would be crucial to transform the agri-food system and, to a very sustainable, nature-positive production system without compromising the quality of food, without compromising the natural resource base, and addressing the climate change issues. So thank you very much. There are many other issues. I have taken more time. I'm extremely sorry for that. But I stop here, and please continue, and I can contribute anytime subsequently if you wish. So I stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mahapatra. It's always a pleasure to listen to you. And I think, like you very lucidly laid out, our elegant production story, the significant pilots we have also created when it comes to sustainability, and the fact that they're scientific, we have seen enough results. And the challenge ahead of us is how do we scale these? And I think the role of public-private partnerships, like you mentioned, that we'll look at as we scale these. Thank you so much for being with us here today. And also thank you to all our speakers in the opening session for really leaving us some very thought-provoking statements. The piece around how do we trade carbon as a commodity. Mr. Campari mentioned the fact the externality cost, which is threefold the cost of production, really makes you pause in terms of understanding how we reduce those costs, both external and both real costs that we actually bear. The examples that we're seeing, as Mr. Bagai also pointed out, in terms of rural community pooling hubs, models that need to be looked at in multi-stakeholder partnerships as we address the issues of food waste. So thank you so much to all of our opening session speakers. We are really privileged to have you here. And we will be putting the actions and the ideas that have come from these sessions and sharing it again back with the various action tracks as well. So thank you again for joining us. We'll now move on to the next section of the panel discussion. Over to you, Rituja.
Thank you, Meetu. We now move on to the panel discussion segment of this session. We have with us a very interesting and eminent set of panelists. May I invite to chair the panel, Mr. Durai Swaminarayan. We have with us as panelists, Mr. Rahul Sawani, President, South Asia, Corteva AgriScience, Mr. Samir Goel, Managing Director, Coromandel International, Mr. Ratan Lal Tamak, Executive Director and CEO, Sugar Business, DCM Sriram, Mr. Rotash Mal, Chairman, EM3, Mr. Sriram Gopal, Founder, Future Farms, and Mr. Rahul Kumar as a representative of the farmers. I hand it over to you, Mr. Narayan, please.
Thank you very much. It's a privilege to be part of this panel, and also in the back of some very stimulating conversations led by our esteemed panelists. I know we're busted the time, but I think it was valuable to have got all the insights from all of them as well. So let me get straight into the topic. Mr. Savani, pleasure meeting you. So as you have heard all of the experts and then bring it back to near home, what are your views on transforming the agriculture and food system into a circular economy? And how do you see it helping drive sustainable development and environmental protection for India as a country?
Great. Thank you, Dr. Narayan, and great to meet you too. Firstly, I want to be able to thank CII and our esteemed speakers today. I think the nuggets of wisdom, information, insights that we got today was absolutely tremendous. And this conversation could not be more timely. It is one of the most important topics that we can take on today, and I'm glad we are tackling it head on. We do recognize the importance of the global food system. for both the people, the planet, and we want to be able to applaud, firstly, the UN for this call to action. I think it's like I said, it's a very timely call to action. Both efficiency, productivity, as well as innovation in agriculture and in the food system itself is going to make a difference, not just in terms of sustainability. It's going to make a difference in terms of food security. It's going to make a difference if championed the right way in terms of farmers' incomes. And I think that was brought up as a key point earlier. And it's going to make a difference in enriching the lives of all stakeholders, including consumers, with more nutritional food being available for generations to come. I won't spend time talking about the crisis itself and how many different fronts we face it on. I think we heard about aspects of it in terms of the ecological crisis. We heard aspects of it which are on food security. We heard other aspects of it which are very much about being able to address macro challenges around labor and many other aspects like that. At Corteva, we live by our purpose, and our purpose is to enrich the lives of those who produce and those who consume. And it's not for today, it's for generations to come. This has got to ensure progress for those generations, and that's extremely important. A natural outcome of that purpose for us was our sustainability goals. We launched them in 14 sustainability goals in 2020. They were holistic. It was a commitment that we were making in our operations, but it was a commitment which was very much to be able to serve our farmers towards that, to be able to serve the land, and to be able to serve the communities that we operate in. That holistic approach is one of the most important things in my mind. A couple of areas, Dr. Narayan, that you spoke about earlier too, which I would like to highlight, and I think those are extremely important for us. Number one, enabling innovation. To me, innovation provides us the tools, and it's the innovation of today. I'm not talking about innovations of tomorrow alone. Yep. We've got all of those tools present. Enabling those innovations through an agile and best-in-class system that accelerates those innovations and the adoption of those innovations is absolutely key. All of those tools exist. And I think bringing those tools first is going to be extremely important. One thing I would say is, I am very positive. I am in general a very positive person, but I'm even more positive based on recent discussions that we've been having as an industry between the government, the private sector, and many other stakeholders. Those conversations are productive. Now it's the time for all of us to hold ourselves accountable and truly get that acceleration of innovation to deliver results for us. I think we are getting there, and I'm confident we will get there. The second thing I would highlight is holistic approaches. To be able to introduce what I would call not regulations to prevent, but actually market-based systems and approaches to incentivize adoption and hitting of targets for those innovations. And that's very much doable. We know that positive reinforcement is going to be able to not only make a difference for climate change and enable nature positive agriculture, it's going to also hit those other aspects we spoke about food security, as well as be able to hit on very much for us this key aspect of enriching farmers and getting their incomes up too. The last one I would highlight as part of this circular economy for us in agriculture, and I think it's extremely important, is thinking of it as moving away from that linear model and going towards this more circular economy model is going to result in shrinking of those greenhouse gas emissions. And we all spoke about that, and agriculture can do that. It includes advancing positive climate systems. It includes supporting farmer practices. I think we just heard a lot about supporting those practices. And then about things such as sequestering carbon in the soil, being able to have other means of removing carbon, and encouraging better use of resource. This is not different than how farmers think. Believe me, if you go talk to a farmer out there, most farmers will tell you they want to be able to utilize their resources to the maximum. It's better for their productivity. It's better for them leaving the land to generations to come. And they are natural allies for us in it. And we must have them at the table to be able to engage in this conversation. Farmers of all sizes embrace that diversity that we have in the country to be able to get them on the table and be represented in this conversation. Finally, I just want to highlight one initiative from our side, Dr. Nayan, and it's a lot of examples around direct seeded rice today. I'm pleased to share, we have a program, a leading program called Acre Next. It's holistic in the inputs that it provides, the practices it serves. It goes across a public-private partnership, NGOs involved in it, multiple partners that we've had. We've got some, it's got great impacts that it can make in terms of greenhouse gas emission reduction, improving the water table, as well as improving productivity for farmers and their incomes too. It's going to provide us the tool. It's an example of what a tool like that looks like for the challenges of the future, as we see this climate change take off even more. We have recently done a partnership as part of that with the 2030 Water Resources Group, and I'm very pleased to share that today. It's a unique public, private, as well as civil society partnership for us. It provides a framework in Uttar Pradesh for addressing around 40,000 acres of land. And with this unique system, and it's going to bring multiple benefits as we progress this forward to rice cultivation. And I think that can make a big impact. It's practical, it's on-farm agricultural practices. It helps farmers protect the environment while also economically benefiting from it. And to me, being able to go across those circles of priorities is key to be able to scale up a program. Is there more that can be done? I spoke about those 2 points. And if we can do those 2 points, programs such as this can not only make an impact on those 40,000 acres. I know these partnerships can make an impact across multiple millions of acres of land. And I'm looking forward to that day, Dr. Nayan. Back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Swani. Very well articulated and resonates clearly with a lot of the comments that we've heard. But more importantly, it also resonates with me. The conversations that is happening across multiple stakeholders with having the common goal to deliver on is incredible. And the piece that you said, and we also heard about carbon sequestration, carbon credit, I would actually throw up a bigger challenge, right? While that is going on, why don't we in India talk about sustainability credits, which pulls in carbon, water efficiency, and soil health? So clearly there's a lot of opportunity for us to collaborate and work on. And so thank you very much for starting your insightful comments. Let me go next to Mr. Samir Goel from Coromandel International. Mr. Goel, a pleasure to meet you again virtually. How can we in the industry be more responsible towards increasing consumer consciousness towards greener, or I would actually broaden this to say sustainable solutions? Your thoughts, sir?
Thanks, Durai, and really appreciate what has been said by the previous speakers. It was a pleasure to hear them, and what Rahul had said, that there are a lot of nuggets. Coming now to the industry on promoting, and we'll talk about sustainable solutions. First, and I think Dr. Mahapatra talked about it, promoting integrated crop management practices. This includes balanced nutrition and pest applications. This will be the key to drive sustainable farm practices, right? All the stakeholders, like you had mentioned, industry, agriculture, universities, scientists, farmer, producer organizations, startups, NGOs, need to promote balanced crop application recommended to the farmers. And this will include use of organic fertilizer for soil health and fertigation, specialized nutrition, including foliar applications for meeting the special nutrition needs, and biologicals for integrated pest management. This is in addition to the conventional inputs. We heard about that on fertilizer and crop protection. And we in Coromandel actually are at the forefront of this, being the largest agri-input provider. We are into all the streams. We have, over 800 outlets mainly in our markets, which reach out directly to 3 million farmers to give them this advice. And it's also to promote the best practices. Main thing is to reduce the pesticide residues and make the food safer. The second thing is, which is the farm advisory services. This has to be done by all stakeholders, again, to strengthen the farm advisory practices through the use of technology for diagnosing soil and crop health and recommending agriculture input usage as per the crop needs. The other thing which is important is to increase the nutritive value of the food for better human health. We heard what was spoken by the earlier speakers, that we are self-sufficient in cereals. In fact, we have ahead. But to promote fruits and vegetables, to promote protein is absolutely important. And what we can do is like take fertilizer. We are adding things like zinc, which we hope through the plant can go through the human system and obviously help in better nutritive value. I think the other thing is when we come to the industry, we talk about industry 4.0. So it's not just on the, at the input side at the farms, but on the manufacturing side, we need to continue to work toward zero discharge by recycling water and other byproducts during the manufacturing process, and basically to use newer equipment technology, use of sensors and data analytics to reduce any emissions. Also, now it's been said, and in fact, government may dictate it, is clearer alternatives like renewable energy, talk about green nitrogen or green ammonia, which will help to reduce the dependence on non-renewables. Industry have been working on improving the efficient delivery mechanism and use of greener chemistry that can improve the resource utilization and obviously minimize environment impact. I think the last is going green. We have to ensure that it's our plant and all, we develop our sustainable ecosystems around our plants. For example, at our Kakinada fertilizer plant, we have promoted 350 acres of marshland and converted it into a bird sanctuary by planting over 25,000 trees, and over 4,000 bird species actually come across as far away from Europe and Asia, and they migrate every year to nest and breed. In fact, UNDP has acknowledged this factory, and also Discovery Channel calls it the greenest factory in India, if not the world. I think just to quote on this, what was said earlier, the first green revolution was driven by agri inputs, which helped us to achieve self-sufficiency in food grains. The second green revolution will be powered by superior products, smarter delivery mechanism, and ag tech based on data analytics to achieve income security, but more importantly, also farm sustainability. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Goyal, for your insightful comments. Clearly, and congratulations on the site and the way you've developed it. That is a role model for the entire industry. At some stage, we'd love to see and hear more about it. So thank you. Next, let me move to Mr. Ratan Lal, who is the CEO and Executive Director of the Sugar Business for DCM Sriram. Pleasure to meet you, Mr. Tamak. How do we address the issues of lowering water tables and management of water-intensive crops, especially given your experience in managing this with sugarcane, and are there learnings for the larger ecosystem?
Thank you, Dr. Narayan. It is a pleasure to be with all of you, and a lot of stimulating discussions in the earlier sessions. So coming to the point straight, I should like to share my experience, because as you have mentioned that we are implementing water conservation program under our flagship program, Sustainable Sugarcane Production Program. It is a multi-stakeholder partnership, and we are having partners like International Finance Corporation, Solidarity, and one of the valued partner, EM3, is led by Mr. Ratan Lal, is also our partner. And there are companies like Mahindra, Revolution. So we have tried that all technology providers come on board, and provide their solutions in the entire agri-value chain. So this is the objective. And the overarching theme of the project is sustainable climate smart agriculture. So that is the theme. And the pillars of the program are, of course, productivity enhancement, soil health enrichment, improving water use efficiency, mechanization propagation, and achieving sustainability standards. So those are the objectives. Coming to the topic, basically, as far as water conservation is concerned, we clearly believe that water is the essence of life. Therefore, anything and everything has to be done for living. So for achieving this, we have created a set of activities. We are implementing a set of activities which are some time-tested techniques and also new age technologies. For example, trash mulching is a very well-known technology. But the issue is how to implement it on scale with effectiveness. There comes the role of companies like EM3. So we are doing trash mulching and trash shredding. And last year we did about 47,000 hectare trash mulching. Second is, for example, composting. Dr. Ratan Lal mentioned a lot about soil health. I'm delighted to share with you that we have set up 17,000 compost pits in our area to increase the soil health. That is also helping in water retention capacity of the soil. Third is drip irrigation. We have a partnership with Rabobank and Revolution, and we are implementing a project on drip irrigation with fertigation. Fourth is laser leveling. Again, with the help of companies like EM3, we are doing laser leveling on large scale. So basically, my recommendation is that we should have very simple solution, very practical solution, but those should be implemented on scale, and that enabling ecosystem has to be provided by the corporate. Corporate has to own that responsibility, but the activities have to be implemented in project and mission mode. So certainly it can be achieved. As far as supply side is concerned, again, there also very proven technology like rejuvenation of ponds. 108 ponds have been rejuvenated by us. So there are so many abundant wells in our area. We have recharged all those abundant wells. About 500 abundant wells are there. So we have converted them into recharging pit. So if you combine all these activities, certainly the objective can be achieved. And at the last, I'm happy to share with you that during last 5 years, we have saved about 574 billion liter of water in the catchment area of our factories. And it has been validated by Indian Institute of Sugarcane Research, Lucknow, which is an apex body of ICR. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tamak, for your insightful comments. The theme is resonating clearly. Ecosystem, partnership, owning outcomes collectively. This is just amazing. And the other piece that also, I think, I'm starting to pick up based on all the comments, somewhere aligning with societal value creation. You just talked about what you've done for your community and how the whole thing, we talked about a bird sanctuary. We are great at talking about products and technology, but we never come back and talk about what we are doing beyond it. And that is an amazing purpose-driven organization. So very well articulated. Then let me move to my dear friend, Mr. Mal. Hey, Rotas, good to see you. How are you? I'm already glad to see you being mentioned by Mr. Tamak as well. So, Rotas, to you, what can be the approaches for scaling uptake of sustainable practices such as micronutrients, drip irrigation, mulching, and biofertilizers amongst farming communities? And what has been your experience on the ground so far? You're muted, Rotas.
Yeah, I've been the silent spectator, so that question paper comes out of the blue. So if you will permit me to be a little wayward in my answer. Fascinating session so far. And the fundamental thing going backwards on scalability is the following. No one company or a set of companies can do any one thing together. It needs, I call it the NATO of competencies, so to speak. to scale anything like this up. I'll take an example out of Roshanji's experience, our experience with them. While we are a B2F company, we were a B2F company to start with. We're more and more looking like a B2F and a B2B company, which is take a large corporate, got 500,000 acres under their command, so to speak. They don't own it. But that acts as a funnel, both in services and in many other terms, to be able to access large bodies of farmers. The fundamental thing about technology and its deployment is that the denominator, i.e. the number of users, has to be large for it to be affordable. Taxis operate only, we are a taxi service of technology in that sense. Taxis operate when the denominator is large, and something like this allows us to do that. Now, let's pick up any one example out of this. We talked about soils, I mean, we talked fertilizers just now and so on. Truth be told, the farmer really doesn't know how much he's applying. There are approximations, and as we know, science is dependent on measurement and management. You made a comment early on in this session saying we require to bring in digitization to the farm. Now, digitization, IoT, sensors, all this is the same software, all this is the same mass. Now, until you can measure digitally what's under the soil, right, you're not going to be providing any advisory. An advisory from a neutral source, so to speak.
Right.
Ultimately, everybody's got an advisory. Anybody who has a product has an advisory. But does the consumer of that product believe somebody? There has to be a neutrality. The extension system has gone where it is. So do pull me back, D, if I'm straying far away from your question. But let's take soils for example. Fundamentally, and this is what we've just started, we're deploying handheld cameras to pick up signals, surrogate numbers from the soil to say what is it short of for a given variety, for a given crop. In terms of water, we are bringing in more precise as a service, more precise drip irrigation. Roshanji, coming to you in a few days with that. More precise irrigation to be able to save more water. Unfortunately, it's not priced, but precision also leads to yields, right? The saving of water is not the story in India. The farmer is not buying the story. What he is buying is the fact that his crop yield per square meter goes up. And if we can do that using these technologies. To your own domain, D, we're talking crop protection, right? Now, there's pretty good talk about, hovercrafts and drones and so on and so forth. Ultimately, what's it about? Bringing precision to the leaf or the root, right? How you deliver it. For example, if I give you a solution, and it's currently being tried out, not in India, but by my collaborators in Israel, helium balloons with pipes running below them, and you spray from the top, right? Now you can control heights, and you don't have any problems of energy to weight ratios and all the kinds of things that bedevil this entire story. So when it comes to, and I'm speaking, I don't have very expanded knowledge on everything that has been spoken, but speaking as a technology taxi service wala, the only one thing I know, A, the denominator has to be large, and B, the delivery of services cannot be through many networks which are sitting on top of each other. There has to be a common platform. And fundamentally, if you want to deploy technology and machines, a lot of people have to come together, break down or make more osmotic their P&Ls and balance sheets so they can talk to each other, integrate technology and communication so we can serve, and therefore provide value and extract value. Have I strayed too far away from the question you asked me? Now you're on silent, D.
Sorry about it.
I've managed to silence you.
Which is not the first time, I must tell you. We are always impressed by you. No, but you are giving a much more broader answer, which comes back to the fundamental issue we are facing. Whatever we do needs to be economically viable and create value for the farmer at the farm level, and ultimately it needs to be created in a holistic manner, right? So
Just one more observation, Dee. I know we are pushing time. Just one more observation. We do know that 90% of the plants is unfortunately what's called residue. It's got some significant, very, very significant value. And therefore, the 10% of the plant is what gives the food, and the balance goes to just goes waste. I think fundamentally, if you're talking about the UN's SDG goals and so on, this business of managing residue has to be at the center of a lot of what we do, and pay the farmer for the value of the residue. So if we are creating steam or we are creating power out of it, that is 9 rupees a unit. The backflow of that value to pricing the residue is one of the key things that we have to do. And I think there, a lot of us coming together will play eventually a very large role.
No, well said, Ratan. That's why I threw out this big idea of sustainability credits holistically. It's no longer credits for carbon, no longer credits for water. It is everything that you're talking about. So therefore, how can we, for the world of smallholders, create something unique and not just get stuck with what is being developed in the Western world, and come back, localize it, work with the government, and bring it as a transformational opportunity for which is relevant to us. But you covered it well, Rotas. With your permission, let me go to the next panelist here, Mr. Sriram Gopal. Hello, Mr. Gopal. So from your perspective, and he's the founder of Future Farms. So what enablers are needed to scale up for technologies, innovations to be commercialized rapidly, Mr. Sriram? Mr. Gopal.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Naren. I think firstly, I'd like to thank CII for offering this opportunity to present my thoughts and my company. So yeah, just coming back to the question, I think fundamentally we need to reimagine most of these thoughts from a solution point of view. I mean, this is my bare observation, right? Because agriculture, as we all know, has been there for thousands of years, and sometimes there could be a little bit of a baggage issue here, like, and I'm just saying it out there, like, because we've been following certain customs and traditions and the way of approaching this for a very, very long time. And usually we look at it from an incremental point of view, right? So maybe a fresh perspective. For example, what I know better. I'm a guy pretty much born, brought up in a city. So while I know agriculture has thousands of adversities, if you take urban farming, the same adversity is also a benefit. For example, there is no multitudes of soil here. It's all concrete. So the variable has just become a constant. And we probably have to approach this from a different lens altogether. Yep. So while, we are progressing from inputs to, process to technology, I think maybe the approach should be more top to down. I think it must be more from a solution downward, right? Like at the end of the day, what are we really trying to do? There is a farmer, smallholder, or a large corporation, which is trying to make or grow a commodity. And in this case, it happens to be food. And why should it be any different from any other raw material that we grow? And this seems to be perishable. So we need to kind of have a just-in-time approach to kind of get it to its logical conclusion so that everybody in that chain gets paid for their efforts. So if you look at things from this point of view, right, I think we can approach this in a slightly different way. Like we know that we are talking about cold storage. We're talking about increasing efficiency in production. We're talking about technology intervention in all of this, right? But it's also the other side. It is also responsible consumption. So very, very few people actually address this, right? Like, for example, I always wonder if the national television channels came up and said, this is the crop of the month, or this is the fruit of the month. And they just have to do that, right? Like they give you 10 crops and say, everybody please go buy, because this will save a lot of this backlog. Then maybe we don't need that much of cold storage or the infrastructure, because that much momentum would be there. And the farmers can plan their sowing, so to say, because the government is giving a calendar. And I know, and I'm approaching this purely from a consumer point of view, right? Like, what do we need? Today, I think as a country, we are kind of moving towards calorie per person to nutrition per calorie. So we have become more conscious, right? So, and plants at best are like containers. They don't produce anything, but they store or they take up all the richness or the 17 micronutrients and so on, and pass it on to us, if anything. So where technology comes in my opinion, is what you can't measure, you cannot improve, right? So basically, whatever technology it may be, I think our approach is, first, is it farmer friendly or user friendly, right? And two, is it adding to the problem or is actually aiding to solve the problem? Because in the world of IT and all of that, like these SAPs, if you look at it, they are most efficient, but 90% of the guys who use softwares like SAPs are all large corporates, because you need a secondary level of training to even to understand how SAPs operate, right? And if you look at SMEs and really small startups, they would run miles away from any systems because they don't have the processes to follow those systems. Now, smallholding farmers are exactly that, right? So they don't have a process, they don't have systems in place. They are merely driven by what the neighbor is sowing or what a seed company or an input company is actually advising you to do so, and hoping that everything will be well at the end. In my opinion, I think at least my startup, what we try and do is we try and address the alternative approach to farming. So we are looking at the urban population, and they are interlinked with so many of the SDG goals, right? Like if you look at poverty, if you say that India is a country with 67% of people depending on agrarian economy, and then you have rapid urbanization. So that means there is massive displacement of people from their farmlands. They can't coexist. That's where, it kind of gives rise to poverty. And food becomes a commodity, and there is disconnect between the producer and the consumer. The producer doesn't care about how it reaches the end person, right? It's all about biomass generation. So if I need to put 10 times more pesticide to create this commodity, I'm still going to go ahead and do that because I don't really know. There's no visibility on who's consuming, right? So that disconnect. So that kind of reflects on the good health of the SDG goals as well. And then the last point is, the one that I already addressed, that is responsible consumption. So what we are really trying to do is flip this on the head, right? So we are building, so in my opinion, McDonald's is a great model for sustainable food production, because they sell limited amount of food and it's a limited variety. They have 36,000 stores. I know it's a weird comparison, but just look at it this way. They are the largest procurer of apple in the world. They're the largest procurer of onions, potatoes and tomatoes in the world. That is because it's completely demand driven. Think about it. If you can create food pockets that is more nourishing, that is more accessible to people, and that solves a purpose, and work backward, then all the technology at different parts of this value chain, I think will really make an impact and definitely move us forward.
Thank you. That was very well articulated, and clearly I would actually build on what you said to say that there's no reason why a smallholder farmer with technology done right can't get the same benefit that large farmers are getting. The question is, how do you make it simple and easy to disseminate? Rituja, my question, we are well past time, but I do need to come back to our farmer panelists. Do we have a few more minutes to go through with that?
Sure, sir. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Let me now move to the real person who can give us real feedback, Mr. Rahul Kumar, who is a farmer. And Kumar Saab, namaskar. Okay, you're there. Namaskar. Okay. नमस्कार मेरा ब्रोकन हिंदी में आपको नमस्कार मैं कोशिश करूंगा मेरा हिंदी ठीक शायद नहीं होगा थोड़ा माफ कीजिए पर पहला सवाल आपसे है जब हम खेती के बारे में बात करते हैं तो उत्पादन के तरीकों में कौन सा परिवर्तन बहुत आवश्यक है आज, और पर्यावरण स्पेशली संस्थानों स्पेशली एनवायरमेंट रिसोर्सेज जैसे पानी का बचाव या मिट्टी का उर्वरता, इसमें क्या बदलाव लाना है?
सर एक्चुअली बात करें हम लोग पानी को बचाने के लिए तो एक AWS जो है अपना अल्टरनेट जो वाटर ड्रायर जो है, एक पाइप है, उसकी हेल्प से हम लोग रूट तक चेक कर पाते हैं कि कितना पानी पड़ा है कितना नहीं पड़ा। एक्चुअली अननेसेसरी जो पानी की वेस्टेज हो रही है उसको इससे थोड़ा कंट्रोल किया जा सकता है।
अच्छा,
है ना। और एक मतलब जो उसकी रूट जो है वो गलने से भी बच जाती है, मतलब दोनों बेनिफिट्स फार्मर को हैं एक्चुअली अगर सिस्टमेटिक ढंग से देखा जाए तो, है ना। तो पानी को बचाने के लिए सर मैं रिकमेंड करूंगा कि ये सिस्टम बड़ा अच्छा लगा मेरे को, मैं पिछले 2 सालों से इसको यूज कर रहा हूँ तो बड़ा अच्छा फील होता है जी।
अच्छा, धन्यवाद। और दूसरा सवाल है कि जब अब क्या सतत अभ्यास या सस्टेनेबल प्रैक्टिसेस के बारे में बात करते हैं तो आपको फायदा मिल रहा है, और अभी आप, मैंने सुना है कि आपने चावल के उत्पादन में थोड़ा परिवर्तन लाए हैं, सो उससे आपका क्या अनुभव है?
सर चावल के उत्पादन में परिवर्तन का अगर मैं कहना चाहूँ तो एक जैसे ओलाम कंपनी है अपनी, वो नॉन पेस्टिसाइड पे ज्यादा फोकस कर रही है, तो हम लोग उसी से जुड़े हुए हैं पिछले 2 सालों से। एक तो उससे क्या है कि मेरी कॉस्ट भी थोड़ा कम आ रही है ना, और अननेसेसरी जो चीजें हमें डालनी पड़ रही थी पहले, तो उससे थोड़ा छुटकारा मिल गया है ना। और दूसरा जो क्वालिटी बन रही है इससे थोड़ा मेरे को खुद को, अगर मैं खुद भी कंज्यूम करूं तो मेरे को अच्छा फील होता है कि विदाउट पेस्टिसाइड है, घर पे खा सकता हूं। इवन दो कि मैं अपने रिलेटिव्स को रिकमेंड करता हूं कि आप मेरे से फ्री ऑफ कॉस्ट ले जाइएगा लेकिन खाइए ये, है ना। तो एक तो ये नॉन पेस्टिसाइड है, बड़ा अच्छा है, और एक इसका इन्होंने इंस्पायर थोड़ा सा।
आपका म्यूट हो गए राहुल साहब, आप म्यूट हो गए।
हेलो,
हाँ,
सर
हाँ, we can hear you
जी। तो सर सिस्टमेटिक ढंग से किया जाए तो sorry for disturbance, actually some call is coming from other side.
no problem, बताइए।
तो मैं बताना चाह रहा था कि एक नॉन पेस्टिसाइड का जो
is having a challenge with the
जी
आप म्यूट पे चले गए हैं राहुल जी।
हेलो
जी, हाँ, अभी वापस आ गए।
जी 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 मैम। हाँ, तो पानी के बारे में हम लोग बात कर चुके थे कि पानी को कैसे सेव किया जा सकता है। दूसरा बात हम लोग कर रहे थे कि क्वालिटी को कैसे मेंटेन करना है और जो उसकी कॉस्ट है वो कैसे रिड्यूस की जा सकती है। तो कॉस्ट को रिड्यूस करने के लिए मैंने अभी आपको बताया कि हम लोग जो विदाउट पेस्टिसाइड की कोशिश करते हैं, इवन दो कि मैं खुद कोशिश ये करता हूँ कि जो भी मेरे को रॉ मटेरियल मिले गांव के अंदर से, जैसे गोबर की खाद होगी, मैं वो भी थोड़ा रूटीन में यूज करता हूँ, तो थोड़ा सा कॉस्ट
सो बेसिकली आप
हमारी कम हो सकती है उससे।
ठीक है, तो ऑल्टरनेट तरीके से यूज कर रहे हैं या बताइए।
एक छोटा सा और रिक्वेस्ट करना चाहूंगा, जैसे हम लोग मैं आपको फायर के बारे में बताना चाहूंगी। हम लोग इसकी जो वेस्ट मटेरियल है उसको हम लोग फायर करते हैं बाद में।
हाँ।
तो उससे देखो 2 चीजें हो रही हैं एक्चुअली। अगर मैं बताना चाहूँ तो एक तो लोगों के अंदर ये डर रहता है कि अगर हम लोग डे टाइम में फायर करेंगे तो एक इश्यू बनता है, देखो, है ना। अगर देखो 2 तरीके हो सकते हैं, या तो हम लोग उनको प्रॉपरली एक चैनल दे दें कि आप इसको अच्छे से थोड़ा सा ड्राई करके इसको या तो फायर करें। देखो अगर कोई तरीका नहीं बनता है तो, क्योंकि जो इवनिंग या मॉर्निंग टाइम के अंदर जो फायर होती है उससे जो फॉग निकलती है वो बहुत ज्यादा मतलब हार्मफुल है आई थिंक। और दूसरा, अगर हम लोग इसको डीकम्पोज करते हैं तो उससे एक तो पेस्टिसाइड हमें ज्यादा यूज करना पड़ता है। मैं खुद का एक्सपीरियंस बता रहा हूँ सर, है ना, कि एक तो कीड़ा लगने की ज्यादा चांसेस रहते हैं। नंबर 2 कि जो डिले हो रहा है हमारी प्रोसेस के अंदर, जैसे व्हीट सोइंग का जो टाइम है उसके अंदर थोड़ा डिले होते हैं, तो दोनों फैक्टर रहते हैं। तो वैसे मैं काफी टाइम से मैं खुद बर्न नहीं कर रहा, लेकिन मेरे को पेस्टिसाइड डालना पड़ता है। देखो वीट के टाइम पे ये मेरी मजबूरी रहती है। 1 साल मैंने नहीं डाला था, तो उससे मेरे को बड़ी प्रॉब्लम फेस करनी पड़ी।
अच्छा, उत्पादन में?
हाँ जी सर, उत्पादन तो देखो सर ज्यादा फर्क नहीं पड़ता अगर हम लोग उसको अंदर डिस्ट्रॉय करें या फिर उसको बर्न करें, तो दोनों में उत्पादन ऑलमोस्ट सेम रहता है, ज्यादा फर्क नहीं पड़ता कुछ। लेकिन दिक्कत यहाँ पे ये आती है कि हम लोग चाहते हैं कि नॉन पेस्टिसाइड करना चाह रहे हैं एक्चुअली,
ठीक है
ना, हम लोग खुद के लिए भी और लोगों के लिए भी। लेकिन अगर हम लोग मैं बता रहा हूँ कि अगर पराली को अंदर बर्न ना करके अंदर डिस्ट्रॉय करते हैं, तो उसके केस के अंदर हमें उसको ओवरकम करने के लिए पेस्टिसाइड देनी पड़ती है सर, ओवरडोज देनी पड़ती है बल्कि वो।
ठीक है, एक्सेस यूज करते हैं।
बिल्कुल सर, अगर नहीं देते हैं तो उसका खामियाजा हम लोग भुगत चुके हैं सर, हमें भुगतना पड़ता है ना।
वेरी गुड, नहीं बहुत अच्छा, वेरी गुड इंसाइट। थैंक यू वेरी मच, रियली बहुत धन्यवाद आपका विचारों शेयर करने के लिए। एंड थैंक यू। And as we conclude, before I transition over to you, I must thank CII for really promoting me to be a doctor. I'm not a doctor. I just want to clarify, all of you calling me doctor. But any case, it was a very good discussion, timely, but more importantly, great insights from every one of you on this panel. And the bottom line is, I think we started by saying this clearly, time for action. So it's no longer any one of us, but all of us collectively can make a difference. So back to you to conclude.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for chairing this very interesting panel. With this, we bring this very interesting session to a close. I would like to thank all our speakers for taking out time and joining us. I'm sure this has been a great learning experience to each of us who has been listening to the conversation. I would like to thank our partners, the Food Future Foundation and GIZ, and also our sponsors, Mondelez, ITC, Cargill, Nestle, ADF, Kellogg's, and Corteva. Thank you very much for joining us on this session. I request all of you to please log on to our next session, which focuses on advancing equitable livelihoods. The session has started just now. I request all of you to join us in our next session. Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.